Scoop with Superior. I'm your host, Martha.
And I'm Brianna.
And today we're going to talk about the clinical trial journey from inception to reality.
Awesome. Yeah, so this is a great topic. So we want to talk about how do clinical trials begin? Like, where does the idea come from? So when we think about clinical trials, oftentimes we think about the first phase 1 through phase 2, 3, 4, but let's talk about the idea of how it all begins. And it usually starts with some sort of condition, health condition where you have a question, is that health condition treatable? There's a need for something. So
if we think about the condition or the need, we always think about the COVID vaccine. So at that time, during the pandemic, height of the pandemic in 2020, there was a need for the COVID vaccine to treat COVID symptoms and to prevent COVID symptoms.
Right.
So that was the inception. That was the thought process behind it. So then there are scientists, doctors, everybody that's together and say, okay, we have this need. What can we do to address the need? And then when we think of it, we don't always have to think about COVID being so big, right? It was so fast paced. But there are things like lupus that there needs to be a cure or a symptom relief for it.
Right. And sometimes too, when we think about the need, it could be that there's already treatment on the market, but we need something that's more effective when we talk about health conditions. So that's why we sometimes see that certain health conditions have multiple treatment options, because there's still a need for better treatment or to treat it a different aspect of the disease.
And when you're thinking of drugs that's already or a condition, that's already on the market, you think of diabetes. There's a lot of diabetic medication that's on the market today.
Right.
Is one better than the other? I don't know. I think it's dependent on the makeup and that patient-centric care. So you would work with your physician to see what's the best for you.
Okay.
And so now we have the concept. Where do we move in after the concept?
So kind of after that, after you realize what your need is, it's like, okay, let's get to digging and start to think about what can we piece together as far as different treatments. So you have all these different ideas of treatment options, and you just begin to test them out, kind of in that preclinical phase of just let's kind of dig around and kind of see what's available.
And sometimes in that preclinical phase, there's all types of moving pieces. So there's treatment on animals, there's treatments on lab work, and there are all kinds of work. And we won't get into all of that because that's not our expertise.
Right.
And then we jump into phase 1.
Yes.
So phase 1 is truly where there's healthy participants. So these participants do not have the condition. So they are healthy, great BMI, usually don't smoke, like the ideal person.
Right.
Do we find that ideal person a lot?
No.
But there are facilities that have these, and what they're doing for these people, we're testing for the efficacy and the efficacy, and that's it. There is the efficacy of it.
And I think also too, when we think of phase 1, the big thing to think about is usually going to be a smaller population of people, because right now we're still kind of trying to understand the treatment, so we don't want to expose it to so many people. And that's also why we kind of use that healthy population also, because we don't want to kind of test something on someone who maybe has some pre-existing conditions that probably wouldn't be good for that group of people.
That's a great point, those pre-existing conditions. The second part now, we're rolling, right? We got our medication and we made it through preclinical, we made it through phase 1, now we're phase 2.
Yes.
And so in phase 2, it's a greater population.
Yes.
It's usually the people with the condition that's being tested. And then that's kind of where we come in, our site, right?
Yeah.
Superior Clinical Research. We do a lot of phase 2 studies. It is a bigger population than the phase 1, but it's not a huge population. So what happens in the phase 2 stage, Rihanna?
So a lot of the times in phase 2, at this point we understand better the efficacy of the treatment, but maybe we want to understand more about dosing. We want to maybe compare the doses, maybe at a higher and a lower dose, to kind of see what does the research data tell us for a suggested dose, so that when we move forward in our next phase, we have specified a dose that we think is best for that treatment group.
Yep, and then in that phase 2 space, it's a multi-center. So it's not only someone like Superior Clinical Research, there are other research sites that are always trying. And then we're also looking for adverse events.
Yes.
So we're looking for safety of the patients. We're looking for all those things in that. We're checking dosing. We may be checking comparative. We're checking a lot of different things. After we move through phase 2, we pop into phase 3. And phase 3 is huge. It's multi-center, usually multi-country, because now we're trying to see, is this working? Is our product working? What kind of side effects are we having? What kind of issues do we notice? Issues can be anything from the side effects that we call adverse events to how it smells, right? How does it make people feel? How do people look at the tablet? So they're checking for all those things in this phase 3 trial.
Yeah, and I think also too with those phase 3s, it's also where you really helping to identify even more of those side effects. So we kind of see them in the phase 1 and phase 2, but because the phase 3 is so big, you really get to get a good idea of the side effects or potential side effects of the treatment, as well as really understanding how well it works, and really be able to pinpoint the efficacy of it. In that in those smaller groups, you may see some efficacy, but at phase 3, you'll really see, okay, like this is showing some really promising results.
And which, one of the things that we like to talk about in this space, is it showing results? Is it the placebo effect, right? And you'll start seeing that a lot more in this phase 3 space because it's so huge. And then after phase 3, it goes into market. If it's approved, it goes to the FDA for approval. We won't talk about that in this episode, but then we'll continue the journey through phase 4. And phase 4 is, I think, one of my favorite phases of the journey.
Yeah, because I think at that point, like, we know it's on the market, but you really, at this point, you really get to see it in everybody.
Yes.
It's not like we're picking a group of people. It's like, whoever is on it, we can really understand how it's working for that group of people.
Yes, and so, right, Brianna, it's parallel. It's parallel what's already in the market, and we're still doing continuous studies here. We have a phase 4 device study that's already in the market. And one of the things that we think is cool, that there's certain things that can be done on the market, and then there's certain things that in research that we can't not do. And have been able to explain that to people, because then they're like, oh, well, my doctor can do this. Well, because this is research, we can't do that.
Right.
So those are the phases of the trial journey. So from inception to reality. We hope you enjoyed this quick summary of what the clinical trial journey looks like. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And